Just as a follow-up, because the radio that he talked about has profound implications. It's the Steinbrenner radio, which purportedly has the ability to read across a wide band. And my concern, particularly for designated entities, is an issue that goes to the heart of interoperability, the common area interface, and whether or not, if DEs are technically different in terms of what they look like, in terms of their system, their application. Can you speak to that a little bit?
The radio part of it, in most telecommunication systems, as Walter mentioned, could indeed have implications on the cost of your network and some impact on the interoperability. But I still feel that standard is what is going to allow you to really provide interoperability. It will impact cost, I totally agree. But standard, the definition of interfaces, one problem that you have with the C block is that it is allocated, say, on an MTA basis, on a BTA basis. But if you want to compete with the provider from block A and the provider from block B who's covering a BTA, you need to have a transparent service also within, at least within that MTA. And that means that all the BTAs within that MTA need to have a standard for interoperability. And I think the challenge is going to be more there than it will be at the radio interface, even though there is a cost delta there. Meaning that to compete and provide a transparent network across at least an MTA, all the BTS providers need to agree on a common standard. And that is a big challenge.
Henry?
Just to say something about the interactive thing that you were talking about. I don't have the numbers with me now. I don't know how wide the bandwidth is. But what I'm saying to you is that I look forward, there's an excellent opportunity. It's going to be a small bandwidth. It's going to be very expensive. I look forward for your competitors to be, if you bid, primarily broadcasters, especially TV broadcasters. TV, as we well know, TV broadcasters haven't been doing very well lately, and they need, and they, as they go and start doing some other things such as interactive and high-definition television, they'll be there. My company, we are a wireless cable licensee in Dayton, Ohio, and we are the first system in the world that has interactivity on a wireless system. So what I'm saying is, when wireless does come back, you should explore that opportunity also.
The question is one of, in the IVDS, I guess more so in particular, the bandwidth is very narrow, but there's nothing been said about, or maybe it has, and I'm just getting into this late, the power. The power that you're going to be able to exert into that narrow bandwidth is going to be crucial to the success. What are the power standards? Can you put an infinite amount of power into this narrow bandwidth? I doubt it. What are the power requirements for the, in particular, the IVDS?
Those standards are primarily basically broadcast power levels, okay? If you look at, and I don't have it here with me, but I did file for some of those first 9 markets myself. Those are primarily broadcast power levels with a small narrow band to it. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's 1 or 2 megahertz.
Henry is basically right on the target with that. If you will work with our office, I'll be glad to assist you further through Dr. Stanley's group to make sure that you have the exact. Okay.
Dr. Neiman, that was just a really enlightening presentation, and something that came up to me that outstanding. You said that in order to participate, we have to be able to build, to interconnect, and to manage. Absolutely. And you also said that we have some special limitations, namely we do not have any capital, no experience in building, no experience in managing, and little technical experience.
Wow.
Now, and I that was a real eye-opener. And so what that means to me, and I was glad to hear about the 30 megahertz and the 493 opportunities. But what comes out real clear to me is that the only way we're going to get on this train is the franchise, by able to getting, to get that piece of land. Because we're not going to say that we can interconnect if somebody else gets it, or we can manage, or we understand the technology.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Obviously, those comments were not meant in any way to be derogative in nature, but as kind of recharging your energy so that you get off the ground running, basically knowing that there's a lot of grounds to be covered.
So the critical point for me is, I hope we don't overlook in our discussions the equity issue and the control issue. So very elegantly about the 49% and going from 20 to 40%. And where the FCC stands right now is equity. They say, okay, you have to have equity because we don't have any farces, we don't have any shams.
That's right.
And they've not dealt with the control issue.
Exactly.
And if we do not deal with control, and I've always been a strong advocate that if we can just control, we don't have to have all of it, because we don't have any money.
That's right.
And if we walk away without us as minorities and women and rural not addressing that control issue, I would argue that common sense-wise we will never play in this game.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dr. Simo, my name is Lee Evans, representing Lee Evans Productions from Miami. And in your remarks, by the way, I think you did an eloquent job in explaining what you do.
Thank you.
However, in your remarks, you talked about you have a problem with the incentive. I wonder if you can elaborate on that. It's sort of up in my tenders.
Well, let me probably draw an analogy which may not be well, the first is, of course, that the FCC is relying on the fact that there would be something to gain for investors to help you get started. I'm not sure that an economic decision alone is sufficient to make that kind of a partnership work. For example, if I don't like you, no matter how much economic benefit I get out of the joint venture, I will never be tempted to go into business with you. That's that basic premise. So just assuming that because there's some economic incentives, this would force or encourage an entity to get into business with you is, I don't think, realistic. That's the first problem that I have, and the reason why I concur with what Walter said before in his opening comments. That's really the strong argument in my mind.
Are there any other questions from the floor? Come right up, sir. You should also note that that's one of the reasons we wanted Dr. Simo here, is to give you a very unbiased, very honest, upfront opinion of what the real base is like, where you're working from. And I think he set the stage very well.
I'm Joe Zavaleta from Brownsville, Texas, and obviously we're here because we have limited amount of resources.
That's right.
You've been concentrating mostly on PCS.
That's right.
Granted that we have limited resources, would you concentrate on PCS or IVDS?
Well, my personal bias, obviously, it's probably because I understand it better, not necessarily it's a better option, is that the PCS option is what I understand better, and I can address that more effectively. I'm not sure.
You might want to speak, though, about IVDS and its relatively lower entrance costs as compared to most of the narrowband.
That is true. That would be true. But again, as I said, my bias seems to be mostly for the global picture on PCS. And I think the reason for PCS here is that in IVDS, even though it is a primarily data type service, I like to build, or I'm biased with the voice, data, image, and possibly video services, which is actually a possibility in PCS, that just like a piece of land, you can build a parking lot out of it, you could have a skyscraper out of it, you can pretty much do whatever you please with that 30 megahertz. And the technology is getting up to the challenge very quickly, that you can do, there's plenty of things to be done in a PCS band, if the technology allows.
You know, and I think it's important to point out that narrowband and IVDS is very, very, very narrow spectrum, that you are very, very limited as to what you can do. And when you compare 50 kilohertz,
That's right.
which are some of the allocation bandwidths in that docket, against a 10 megahertz or 30 megahertz piece, I mean, the difference is staggering. It's staggering. And as technologies improve, as compression algorithms improve, as companies begin to compete one with the other, you're going to be hard-pressed to do a whole lot with 50 kilohertz when someone is sitting out there with 30 megahertz.
That's right. Because you can take that 30 megahertz, actually they're given to you in 2 blocks of 15. You can make one block of 15 carry voice and data services, and the other block of 15 carry future services, maybe those kinds of image, interactive, those kinds of, I didn't see any restrictions to that, but what I'm saying, spectrum is really a great investment, and in the PCS you have a great opportunity to get there early.
Henry?
Well, just with what we're saying, 50 kilohertz, 50 kilohertz, it takes 20 times that one to make 1 megahertz.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
So multiply those numbers out, what Walker was saying.
That's right.
So that's 50, that's 20, and then multiply it again.
That's
so
right.
you get into the hundreds of times what you can do with 30 megahertz.
That's right.
As far as what you can do with 50 kilohertz.
That's right.
John, you got a question here.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask you something a bit different?
Sure.
What are the capabilities in the global picture? Because if this is the 21st century of communications, how will this be applied to communicate with the rest of the world? And what is the language capability?
That's a very, very challenging question, because while there is consensus that there's this big movement towards personal communications, you can see that in Europe, the European came up with a standard called the GSM standard, and the derivatives, it's actually an EC decision. They adopted a standard, and they forced the member states of the European community to adopt the standard and clear the bands by December 31st of 1991, and that was done. So you're seeing some embryonic PCS systems in Europe. You can see countries in Africa, in Asia, signing what they call a memorandum of understanding to comply with the European standard. Here in the United States, the standards is actually evolving from industry bottom up, and that's why there's so much debate, and that's why it's taking some time, but it's a good thing. To be able to have global connectivity, the issue of standard and interoperability still remains unresolved. And people are talking about dual mode handset, talking about common air interfaces that are accepted internationally, and in a GSM, they have those kinds of interfaces. So that really, the approach of the European is that your future phone will not be a telephone gadget, but it'll be a credit card called a SIM card or a smart card. So you can use any telecommunications interface anywhere. You can go to the airport, just pick one for free from a rental car company or from the airline company, and engage in a telecommunications transaction with your credit card. And basically decouple yourself from the portable handset and all those devices. So ultimately, your phone will be an intelligent card with all the information, billing and personal information that you require. So it's a long way to go, but that's the vision.
All right, just one question from the floor.
Toby Cooper from Dell Data Systems. I have a question concerning the PCS spectrums that are identified. Why aren't the cities associated with those as they are with the IVDSs, to give you an idea of the demographics that each of those spectrums would reach?
Okay. Your question is, why is the market size not defined in a similar way as the one in IVDS? Well, the problem is that there was a lot of experience taken from the cellular evolution. That initially in the 80s, the cellular market were defined in what they call the MSAs and RSAs. They turned out to be very, very small areas in terms of providing effective communications structures. And the PCS proponents thought that they needed larger geographical areas, and that's why the BTAs and the MSAs were created. It's simply because there were, over the past 10 years, millions of dollars of transactions to aggregate the MSAs and RSAs. So we didn't want to repeat that process. So we started with very, very large geographical areas.